It's definitely been an up and down. I think India got out of the gates better than most countries with how they engaged the Trump administration before the election, just after the election, with a head of state meeting, a quad foreign ministers meeting. But then we began to see some real ripples in the water. The difference of opinion over what settled the India-Pakistan conflict, concerns over India's continued buying of Russian oil, which triggered additional trade sanctions, and so some wobbliness in the middle. But it seems that we're landing the plane relatively okay at this point, meaning that we don't have the trade agreement done yet, but you don't have quite the sense of day-to-day vitriol, mostly, of course, leveraged by the United States against India. So hopefully that sets the table for a more successful 2026 because there's been some down moments this year so far. Well, there weren't a lot. I think the Modi government got out of the gates a little slow for its entire third term. But I would say, with the trade wobbles in the United States and the fact that there's concerns about a slowdown, then you have seen in recent months a real interest in the Modi government to initiate big reforms. So, there's probably a few that crossed my mind. Just a few months ago, when you saw dramatic reforms to the goods and services tax to try to consolidate slabs and add a little bit more, I think, understanding about how companies could react to it. And then just today, a bill that I've been working on for almost my entire adult life, which is to see the Parliament move the insurance bill to allow 100% foreign investment in insurance. So you got a couple, I think, that are already in the pocket, but the Modi government is actively talking about a range of others. They've convened two different committees that are taking a look at some process-related reforms. And so you didn't see many, but they came at the end. And I think that's kind of a trigger point right now. They realize, you can't rely on the United States or anybody else, frankly, for growth, when really the keys to growth are domestic. They're things that the government controls. And even if they're in a coalition government, they have the ability to move difficult things in parliament if they really put their minds to it. Well, India does present a pretty big target because you have seen, since the Modi government came into office, the imposition of a lot of measures that make it more harder for U.S. companies to export to India. That was particularly true during the Modi government's first term. But of course, a lot of that defines, too, what happened since this is not the first time that President Trump's been in office. So some of those trade restrictions we saw early on are still burning in the president's mind, I think. But, we, of course, had a higher degree of comfort about India's acquisition of Russian oil for a while there and stuff. So, sometimes for India, it's not sure exactly what direction to move and to go into. You have seen India's position on trade evolve quite a bit. In recent years, reduction in duties in the budgets, fewer imposition of mandatory local manufacturing rules, and even India signing significant trade agreements with Australia, with UAE. So when the two leaders first announced the intention to negotiate an investment agreement, to me, it didn't sound quite so crazy as it did to a lot of Americans, because if you weren't following the nuance, you hadn't realized India's position on trade has changed quite a bit. This idea about opening up to trade as a way to land global trade flows to come through the country and supply chains, I think the Modi government does kind of understand that. So hopefully that provides the basis for getting a deal done. The numbers still are pretty good, though. Despite the trade wobbles that we see between leaders, the trade numbers, you still see year-on-year growth, both in imports and exports. So, so far, too, policy hasn't had quite as big of an impact on real trade flows as we might expect.